So, Jai Bhim to all of you. This is our last session of the course on about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Constitution and Constitutionalism, where we are looking at various aspects of the constitutionalism and how Babasaheb Ambedkar related to that. And today I'm going to talk about the very important aspects of Babasaheb's very interesting sort of look at the democracy and the various aspects of it. So what I thought at the end of this session, I thought let's concentrate on what Babasaheb Ambedkar really meant by various themes that he has been talking as a book plan to his book, which was unfinished. But as I said, we have been talking about that the book plan is available us so that we can take a look into the various aspects of it and talk about it. So let me share a presentation. So this is our presentation today. And play. Oh, 1 minute. So this is what we will be talking about today in terms of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And it's kind of an exercise in thinking through, possibly what would Babasaheb Ambedkar think if he is meeting the modern Indian politics and society today. And, some of the aspects of, what kind of his principles we can take ahead. So that's why it's titled as the father of Indian Constitution, which is of course Babasaheb Ambedkar meets modern Indian politics and society. And the subtitle is What Would Babasaheb Ambedkar Do? So this is the last session of our course, six session course on Constitution and Constitution. So let's proceed. So before we proceed on to the today's last session, I thought it would be a good idea to briefly talk about what we covered so far in the last 5 sessions. In the first session, we have looked at the introduction that Babasaheb Ambedkar left behind as to this book that he proposed to write, and it goes into what is the Constitution, what is the constitutional law, and the very changing definition of the Constitution itself. And we have seen that Babasaheb Ambedkar brings various thinkers to explain to us as to what constitute the Constitution. And in the second session, we saw, I think this was the most important session of the 6 week session, is about the principles of democracy, federalism, and the separation of power. And as we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar has remarked, as we have seen in one of the sessions, that the Constitution doesn't need any commentary because it's so clear, but it certainly needs a kind of an exploration of the principles as he was trying to do in this book that he wanted to write. So we have seen and in quite a depth the principle of democracy, federalism, and separation of power. And then in the third session, we have gone into the detailed analysis of the separation of power in terms of the organs of the state, legislature and executive and judiciary. The fourth session, we saw the union and state, how the federalism in India can succeed and what are the challenges before the Indian federalism. And in the fifth, that is last session, we have the session we had in the last week. We have seen the rule of law and the rights in this particular framework of the rule of law, and how Constitution of India is itself based on the rule of law. So I thought we will offer this summary to you today. We are going to plunge into much deeper aspects, and we are going to try to cover a lot of ground today. So please bear with a longer presentation today. So, as Babasaheb Ambedkar remarked that when he was writing the Constitution of India, he had double loyalty. So, what kind of a double loyalty that Babasaheb Ambedkar was talking about? He says in his words, I have loyalty to our people inhabiting this country. I also have I have also loyalty to this country. So he has the loyalty to the people on behalf of whom he was launching his movement, and he has fought entire life for the civil and human rights of the one of the most discriminated communities in the history of the world, that is the depressed classes, or in the today's parlance, the scheduled caste. So Baba Ambedkar had the loyalty to his people, and and also to the country. And at one point of time, he has remarked that when the people of India would impartially study his life, they would find that he was the greatest of the patriots that this country would have seen. And he said that only believing that the people who are in the Congress are the patriot is a wrong notion. That it did not have to be in the Congress to be a patriot, and you can be patriot of sterling quality as Babasaheb Ambedkar was, who was often proclaimed that he is the Indian first and last. So he had this double loyalty, and I think this is very important for us to understand that when we are working in the movement, and I'm going to go into some of the aspects of the movement, particularly the Ambedkar movement, as to how we can cultivate this double loyalty towards our country, and what does that imply, having loyalty to the country. I'm going to talk a bit about it, and the loyalty to our people themselves. So let's look at it. And very early on, Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about the vision of the great movement, and that was the beginning of a great movement which will result in the emancipation of our people. So you see, this is a very interesting sort of a comment by Babasaheb Ambedkar, and he made it in the beginning of the movement that which will result. So the goal is the emancipation of a people, and the second, and it's very important, is the establishment of such a society in this country of ours, in which one man will have one value in all domains of life: political, social, and economic. And I think this is very important to have this double goal in the mind, to emancipate the people who have suffered the worst kind of discrimination in the history of the world. And but the untouchables in India, they constitute, according to the NSSO, 20% of India's population. This is a huge population in India. And if you look at the other discriminated people, likewise in the Hindu social order, for example, the OBCs, the Shudras, they constitute more than 50% of the Indian population. So the goal, of course, of the great movement is to emancipate the people and establishment of such a society, such a state of society in this country of ours, in which one man will have one value in all domains of life: political, social, and economic. And Babasaheb Ambedkar is talking about this very early on in his movement. So I think this is a very remarkable vision that is set for Babasaheb Ambedkar. I think based on this vision, we can distill down the entire movement of Babasaheb Ambedkar. So, it's not all is well in the Constituent Assembly. And I find this statement of Babasaheb Ambedkar very interesting and very important to what we are discussing today. It says that I have delivered many speeches which have been guided by the consideration that this country should find it easy to achieve its freedom. So Babasaheb Ambedkar was pro-freedom. Of course, he wanted the transfer of power to the Indians. And he is saying in 30s and 40s that eventually the power will come to the Indians. The question is, who will get what? Actually, it was not the transfer of power that Babasaheb Ambedkar was concerned with. He was concerned with the distribution of the power, as to which community will get what share in the power. So he says, at the same time, I am quite determined to say that if the 60 million, that time, the population of the untouchables, are not safeguarded by means of political rights, and if I do not find proper gesture on the part of the Congress people in the matter of settlement of the safeguards for the scheduled caste. So he's not just talking about the civil rights, political rights, economic rights, social rights. He's also talking about the safeguards for the scheduled caste. No one, I'm sure, will blame me if I take that step. He's saying this to dissociate myself from the Constituent Assembly. And as we know, Babasaheb Ambedkar was the only member in the Constituent Assembly, was the member of his own right. He was an independent sort of a person. And he says, you should, however, remember that in the Constituent Assembly of 292 or so, I am one single solitary individual. You should bear in mind that no matter how great a man may have the intellect or the capacity to argue and to defend, he is, after all, one man, a single individual. If the rest of 291 are determined not to listen the reason, not to listen the argument, but to oppose their opponent, you can well realize my possible helplessness in the Constituent Assembly of 292, where I am only one. And he says, I hope that good sense will prevail and we shall achieve what we want ultimately. So, as we can see that Babasaheb Ambedkar achieved quite a lot, and the underlying principles of our constitution are democracy. Though the word democracy is not used much in the constitution, but it's but obvious that India is a democratic republic, and we have to understand the very many meanings of the word term democracy and how it can be practiced, how it functions. And we're going to look at that today. But I think this is very important that, all is well, not according to Babasaheb Ambedkar. And, eventually he talked about redrafting the constitution and certain amendments. And after drafting the constitution, this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says: our task is not done, it has only begun. So the task has just begun. So we have to all think about how to make the constitution a living document, how to make it work. And this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says: we have got a constitution which provides for democracy. Well, what more do we want? This is the question Babasaheb Ambedkar raised. While the making of the constitution, our task is not done, it has only begun. That's what Babasaheb says. And why must not we rest? This is what he says, and these two things are very remarkable to keep in mind. Number one, we had adopted a constitution totally different from the principles and the rules which really governed our pattern of life. So the pattern of life in India, even today, is not, you know, in accordance with the democratic practices. It's divided into castes, people are set up against each other, and but our constitution is totally based on very different principles. And he says the second point: Indian today are governed by two different ideologies. Their political ideals set out in the preamble of the constitution affirms a life of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Their social life embodied in their religion denies them. So you see, he's talking about the contradiction, the kind of contradiction that he has referred in his final speech in the Constituent Assembly, that politically India will be a democratic country, but socially and economically it will not be so. And the sooner we resolve this contradiction, the better it is for the democracy. So to have a democratic constitution doesn't mean that the country is democratic. And that's a very important point. That's a very important point that Babasaheb Ambedkar is making here. They saying that our task is not done with the writing of the constitution. It has only begun. And that's what we have to bear in mind when we are looking at the question of constitution and constitutionalism. So as I said, that Babasaheb Ambedkar was talking about drafting, redrafting the constitution. But we know that the fundamental values or the fundamental principles of the constitution were never going to change. The value of liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, and dignity of the individual, the integrity of the nation, the very democratic republic. They are, cannot be changed. They are so self-evident that they cannot be changed. So, he's talking about, of course, he wanted to have the social and economic rights enshrined in the constitution, which didn't become the part of the fundamental rights, but he could succeed in getting them enshrined in the constitution through the part 4 of the constitution, the directive principle of the state policy. And as we have seen, he has so many insights to offer in that area. And of course, he found that the constitution should fight for the social and economic evils. He has made it clear many times. And because this most of the discussion is now post constitution, after the constitution came into being. And I took some of the insights from the previous of his writings, but some of the things I'm mentioning here are the post constitution. So they are very important for us to understand how Babasaheb Ambedkar reflected back on the constitution he drafted. So he, of course, talked about the electoral reforms, because in the 1952 elections, as we have seen, even Babasaheb Ambedkar couldn't get elected. And it's such a poor state of affairs in this country that the man of sterling character, the man who gave this country the democratic constitution, and he did so much for so many people, and he put India on a very solid economic footing, as we know. But despite of that, he couldn't get elected in the 1952 election. That is the first election India had. And, he was himself a part of preparing the electoral roll. But it's so sad that he couldn't get elected. And he saw that, the problem lies in the mentality of the people, because the people have the caste in mind. They won't even vote for the most eligible candidate for the parliament. So, of course, he was talking about the electoral reforms, and to ensure that there is a representation for all the minorities. He was also talking about, he was talking about of course, amendment to the constitution to have a very conclusive Indian taxation system. Uh, but he couldn't. He wanted to do much more in that area, and of course, he wanted to have the economic democracy at the heart of the working of the constitution. So we know that he was really, though he was very much clear about the depth of the constitution in terms of the principles it inscribed within, but he was also very much aware of what are the possible amendments that needs to be brought in the constitution. So I just wanted to bring this to you to set the tone for today's discussion. And as we have seen, Babasaheb Ambedkar has given many definitions of democracy, very many definitions of democracy, and these all definitions are very interesting. But after drafting the constitution, these are some of the remarkable definitions that Babasaheb Ambedkar has underlined. He's talking about many metrics of definitions of democracy. But here, and we have seen this definition, but this is coming after the drafting of the constitution, where it says democracy is a form and a method of government whereby revolutionary changes in the economic and social life of the people are brought about without bloodshed. So we can look at the constitution as a framework for bringing the social and economic changes in the lives of the people, and he amplifies that concept in this second paragraph. He says if democracy can enable those who are running it to bring about fundamental changes in the social and economic life of the people, and the people accept those changes without resorting to bloodshed, then I say that there is democracy. So you see, this is the definition that we have to bear in mind when we are looking at what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do in today's India. And that's why this is very important. And Babasaheb Ambedkar himself has raised this question after drafting the Constitution of India. And these are the very important questions. So his question is India a democracy? And we have seen in the interview that he gave to BBC and even in his speeches afterwards, after 1950, he's talking about something very, very deep. He's talking about very interesting ways forward for this country, and he could see the possible pitfalls of certain conditions which if they are not met, how it can jeopardize the democracy itself. And that has happened in the history of the world as to how the democracy was sabotaged in the democratic country. And India is not having these conditions to have a democracy, and that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. And these are remarkable insights. To me, if we analyze each one of the statements of Babasaheb Ambedkar in this arena, we can begin to see that how deep we have to go in terms of our thinking. So what he says is saying that democracy is quite different from a republic as well as from parliamentary government. And this is how we limit the democracy to. We limit the democracy to the republic, and it's okay. It's one of the aspects of the democracy. It's okay to relate the democracy with the parliamentary government, but it's just one aspect of democracy. It says democracy is quite different from a republic as well as from parliamentary government. It says democracy is more than a form of government. The roots of democracy are to be searched in the social relationship in terms of associated life between the people who form a society. And he further gives us a clarity. He says the qualities which accompany this unity are praiseworthy, community of purpose, and desire for welfare, loyalty to public ends, and mutuality of sympathy and cooperation. I think these days there are a lot of books appearing on democracy. And if we look at the writings of Babasaheb Ambedkar, he comes up with a lot of original ideas, many original ideas. But it's really sad that even the so-called Ambedkarite doesn't look deep into his writing and expose them to the world. These are all ideas which people talking about today, and Babasaheb Ambedkar is so deep into his exploration that every single sentence can be elaborated as a proposition to dig deeper into the concept. That's what the scholars have been doing, and many books that are appearing, they enshrine these very interesting concepts. So he says the existence of the caste system is a standing denial of the existence of those ideals of society and therefore of democracy. So the caste system is a direct denial of the democracy, direct denial. And we know in India, there are the group of people who talks about the caste system as, the legitimate social order, like the RSS. Their whole political ideology, or we can say the theology that informs them, is based on the caste system. And their existence itself is a threat to the democracy. That means the threat to the Indian nation itself. And these are the points which are not just, Baba Ambedkar is mentioning, talking about. This is, in general, it's true. Whenever you talk about a very glaring social stratification, you are talking about the, you are contradicting the democracy itself, because the democracy by its very nature is the, as I'm going to show you, it contradicts all the sort of stratification, because the underlying the concept of democracy is the, value of one individual as axiomatic. You don't need religion, you don't need a god, you don't need any thinking to claim that the individual, their value is axiomatic. You don't need a religion to say that, as you are born just like other being, and how we relate to them on that basis is the essence of democracy. And anything contradicting that proposition, that people are unequal, and that too unequal based on their birth, is the very contradiction or very denial of the, ideal of the society, and therefore of democracy. So, this is how Baba Ambedkar has deeply linked society to democracy. And we know, even at the time of Baba Ambedkar, he himself was a thorough scholar of the caste system. In my view, there is nobody who has studied caste as much deeply as Baba Ambedkar did. And we know that when Baba Ambedkar alive, how Congress was allocating the seats based on the caste configuration. That's what is happening even today. If you look at the Indian elections, they are totally caste-based elections. So this is what Baba Ambedkar has to say, and I think this is a very remarkable statement, that is India democracy. And the answer is, we are democracy for the namesake. That's what I would say, isn't it? We have the periodic election. That doesn't mean much, because it has to bring the deeper changes in the lives of the people. More equality, more literacy, more richness. And these are all pattern parameters which determine whether there is a democracy in this country. And the answer is no. And the conditions that Baba Ambedkar underlies, and these are, this framework or the standard, we have to bear in mind when we are talking about the contemporary Indian society, Indian, our country. You see, he says that if there is a glaring inequality, you cannot have a democracy. It's a denial of the democracy. And he says greater inequality leads to the separation of society into a privileged and a subject class. Such a separation prevents social endosmosis. He says this underlying concept of social endosmosis is very important, because the caste is an enclosed group, is an enclosed class, as Baba Ambedkar says, and it doesn't let the interaction exchange between the two groups. So, it prevents the social endosmosis. And Baba Ambedkar says, before the stratification studies came into fashion, Baba Ambedkar says stratification is stunting of the growth of the individual, and deliberate stunting is a deliberate denial of democracy. This is all after the constitution was written. And he says Indian society is disabled by unity in action, by not being able to know what is its common good. The organization of the society depends ultimately upon knowledge of the end of existence. So what as a country we are supposed to achieve, isn't it? What is it that we want to hold in common? And I think how to hold in common as the Indians is totally inscribed clearly in the preamble itself. And we have, in a way, have tried to define who we are. We, the people of India, that's how we define India itself. That, liberty, equality, fraternity, justice, dignity, integrity of this country. So I think these are all values that define, they give us a sort of a common good, that welfare of all is the very purpose of our Indian constitution. But such is not the case. When we look at this society, the society is fragmented, it's stratified, it's divided into, well, 6,000 warring camps. And he says, and one of the clear goals that when he talks about glaring inequalities is this: to make rich richer and poor poorer is not the way to abolish poverty. Likewise, to educate the class which is more educated, and to keep the class which is not educated, away from the education, is itself a denial of a democracy. You see, these are the concepts which are so important for us to understand or bear in mind when we are talking about what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do today. What would he do? He will talk about these glaring inequalities. He will talk about the denial of the basic rights to the people, to the citizens of India. He won't call them the citizens of India because the citizenship, as we know, is a bundle of rights. Without rights, you cannot be citizens. So you see, these are very interesting concepts that Babasaheb Ambedkar has underlined, and this is very important when we are, looking at what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do. So you see, this is a very good definition. Another good definition that Babasaheb Ambedkar has given. He says democracy is a contradiction of hereditary authority or autocratic authority. So you cannot rule the country forever. Nobody is authorized to rule the country forever. For example, in the United States, George Washington, for example, he was a hero, war hero, and he was somebody who played a very important role in the freedom of US, America. And he could have become perpetually the president of United States. He was so popular, but he stepped down after his 2 terms. He said, if I do it, then there is no difference, between the principles against which, the ideas against which we were fighting, the idea of a hereditary authority or autocratic authority, isn't it? And I think that's very remarkable. So what does democracy means? It's a denial, it's a contradiction of hereditary authority. You cannot have one person ruling this country forever. You cannot have an autocratic authority. That simply is not acceptable in the democracy. So what is democracy? Democracy means that nobody has a perpetual authority to rule. But the rule is subjected to sanction by the people and can be challenged in the house itself. So every day, the government in power, the party in power has to be challenged. Has to be challenged every day. And he talks about a very interesting concept. Democracy means a veto of power, isn't it? The power can be totally denied to the person. It is not that, you can undermine the will of the people, saying that, we will rule forever, we will be autocrats forever, we will be dictators forever, we will be authoritarian, majoritarian forever. That's a denial of the democracy. That regime can be totally vetoed out of the power. And that's what Babasaheb says. But he says that not merely the veto of power is important, but there must be immediate veto as well. So every policy of the government has to be scrutinized in the house of the parliament. And Babasaheb Ambedkar defines it very nicely. Immediate veto has to be there. And that is what is the job of the opposition party. So in the democracy is as important as the ruling party. The opposition party is as important as the ruling party, because it sort of challenges the very authority of the ruling party to become an autocratic authority, isn't it? Therefore, Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the existence of the opposition party is very important. Without that, the democracy cannot function. And today we know that the people are talking about one party system. That was what there at the time of the Congress. But even when Congress was dominating, as we have seen, it never exceeded more than 50% of the popular votes. Such is the case with even BJP. They never got more than more than 50% of the votes. So you don't have anybody doesn't have an authority to claim the autocratic authority over the country. It has to bring the diversified voice together. It has to bring all the minorities together. It has to bring in the today's political parlance, the SCs, the OBCs, the scheduled tribes, the minorities. That has to be brought together. Then only we can claim that India is a democracy. So the existence of the opposition is very important for the democracy. So this is the second parameter on which Babasaheb Ambedkar will judge the Indian democracy today. He will look at whether the voices of the opposition are allowed, whether there is a free expression, or their voices are gagged. What is happening in that area? And this what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do. He would promote. He would completely castigate the media. Informed by the particular class or caste of people, giving us one particular view of what is happening. And so I think this is very interesting, that existence of the opposition is very important. This is a very deep concept. The government has to be challenged. The right to criticize the government is the basic human right, isn't it? There cannot be any government which is above the criticism of the citizens. Of course, it has to be done within the law and order, respecting the public morality, but it doesn't mean that you cannot criticize the government. The government, there is a right to criticize the government, and therefore the existence of the opposition is the essence of one of the conditions for democracy to remain what a true democracy. And this is a very interesting point: equality in law and administration. So once a law is made, there has to be equality in law and administration. What we see is there a equality in law and administration, because if you look at the case of the bureaucracy, for example, it is not representative of the people, of the Indian people. How many OBCs, for example, in the bureaucracy, how many scheduled castes in the top echelons, for example, in this on the secretary level, isn't it? So there is no equality in law and administration even today, and Babasaheb Ambedkar will question it as to why it is not so. Where are the OBCs? Where are the scheduled tribes in the top level of the administration? So this is a very insightful statement of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Says the function of the government is to lay down policy, but not to interfere and not to make any discrimination. That the administration must not be interfered with by the government. Good laws can do you no good unless you have good administration. And you can have good administration when you have persons belonging to the untouchables holding high administrative posts from which they could watch how other Hindu civil servants are behaving towards the untouchables and to check them, control them, and prevent them from doing mischief. The untouchables must insist that their representatives are placed in these social, political, economic affairs, key positions. There has to be representation in the key position. For example, why not there should be equality in the judiciary itself? Why is only particular class of people is repeating in the judiciary? Why it is so on the secretary level? Only one particular class of people, particular caste like the Brahmins. So these are very important aspects, and we have to look today. We have to find out the list of the secretaries of the government of India. We have to find at different levels as to who is representing the masses, and whether they have got the locus standi to really claim that they represent the interest of the entire country. So this is a very important condition. Then of course there has to be constitutional morality, which in a word means respect for the constitution, respect for the form of the constitution, respect for the institutions which are created by the constitution, like the Election Commission of India, like the the Consolidated General of India, CGI, like the judiciary, all the institutions which are created by the constitution. They are the creations of the constitution. So being the creators of the constitution, there has to be a very deep constitutional morality, that the democratic institution should never be undermined by anybody. They have no authority to undermine the Election Commission of India, the CGI, for example, the court system. There's no authority at all. And that shows that if the immoral people took over the government, how they can sabotage the constitution itself. And that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. The evil people take hold of the constitution, the constitution is simply not going to work. So we see how, if we look at what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do, he will be very critical of the very undermining of the institutions. For example, the question of the integrity of the Election Commission of India is in the question today. A lot of people are talking about it. And if the independence of the Election Commission of India is lost, which is created by the constitution itself, if it becomes politicized, then where would the democracy go? As we have seen, there is no real democracy in India. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says how we are going to look at how the conditions, how the democracy can be made a kind of a force in this country. We are going to look at that. But this is very important, that there has to be paramount reverence, as Groth says, for the form of the constitution, enforcing obedience to the authorities acting under and within those forms. It combined with the habit of open speech. So the open speech is very important, because without criticizing the government, democracy cannot work. But what is important is the reference for the form of the constitution. So I'm going to move ahead because there is a lot we are going to talk today. And this we have looked at this particular condition at details in the previous session. But I just wanted to bring to you some of the very fundamental ideas of Babasaheb Ambedkar. So, for example, he says that it's not enough to give the representation to the minorities. They have to be empowered so that they can face the majority. And he talks about the principle of weightage as to how that can be done, looking at the social status, economic strength, and educational position. They're all very deep insights of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And he says that today we are riven by sects and atomized by caste. This is a very deep concept, atomized by the caste. The societies are fractured. They are they are looking within. They are not looking at the greater picture. They're not looking at India as one society, one community. They are talking about their caste interests. And what is the ideal before Babasaheb Ambedkar? United India. Not the Brahminical India or the Hindu India or the Muslim India. He is talking about the United India. And it's true that, even today we are riven by sects. We can replace it by communalism and atomized by caste. So, the majority has no morality. Here it has no moral standard to really rule the minority. It goes into this concept very, very deep, as we have seen in the previous session. There is undoubtedly an obligation on the majority to consent to the safeguards for the minorities, and the minorities should not block the way to the unity of all. So we will have a little bit, we will throw much light on that later on. So you see, there is a need of functioning of the moral order. And Babasaheb Ambedkar is a philosopher of moral order, is a philosopher of ethics, and he talks about the positive moral order and the negative moral order. So of course, the negative moral order is the caste system, the communalism, creating the hatred is a negative moral order. And you cannot separate ethics from the politics. It's not possible. So ultimately, we have seen that one of the aspects in which Babasaheb Ambedkar has described democracy or likened democracy with is the ethical democracy. So ethics is not separate from politics. If there is no moral order, this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says, democracy will go to pieces as it is going now probably in our country. So there is no ethics left. There is no niti. There is no niti. And without moral order, the democracy will go to pieces. And he's saying that time it might be going now probably in our country. It's going down. It has gone from bad to the worst. Look at the moral order, the rampant corruption, the kind of nepotism, the kind of the way the national assets are sold out. Public conscience is another very important topic. There is no public conscience. And that is what is important for us to look at as to why there is no public conscience. There is a caste conscience, there is a communal conscience, but there is no public conscience. And what is a public conscience? Public conscience means conscience which becomes agitated. It's a very interesting definition, which becomes agitated at every wrong, no matter who is the sufferer. And it means that everybody, whether he suffers that particular wrong or not, is prepared to join him in order to let him relieved. Isn't it? He says somewhere that the sympathies in India is only limited to the caste. The people are limited by the sympathy within the caste. There are caste organizations. There are people who are looking within, and they have no public conscience. He says if there is no public conscience, the democracy cannot succeed. It is bound to fail. And of course, the social philosophy of the governing class, the class which is coming into governing governing status. It's very important to know what is their philosophy today. For example, the governing class, if you look at the literature that their the literature that they produce, their organizations, there are now ample number of studies which shows how the social philosophy of the RSS and for its offspring BJP is completely rooted in Manusmriti. You pick up their book at random, and the glorification of the inequality, the glorification of a particular class of, and who is doing that? They themselves are talking about it. No Shudra or no Dalit has come up in the defense of the vision that the caste system is good. Only the people who are beneficiaries of it are talking about singing the praise of the stratification of the society. Isn't it? So social philosophy is very important, that it has to be countered. And I'm going to go much deeper into Babasaheb's concepts, and they because throw light on what we might do today. So democracy is the government by law. It is not the government by any diktats. And why this is important? Because parliamentary democracy could well understand that the description of the parliamentary democracy as government by law was indeed very real and very significant, because before it, the rule was personal. The ruler depended upon his wishes in the first place. Secondly, he always placed himself above the law. So there is nobody above the law. Even the prime minister, president, whoever you are not above the constitution. You are below the constitution. You are below the law, because there has to be legal equality. The law was for the people and not for himself. So, he was immune from the law. The king was immune from the law. It says for the people. The rule of law, which we now enjoy, is a well-established principle, as we have seen in the last session. We have so become used to it that we do not regard it as a matter of great virtue. But the significant fact that remains even now is that when we make the law, we place even the makers of law below that law. It's a very interesting statement. We are all below the Constitution of India. Lincoln says very, very beautifully here. He says that the president has the authority to destroy everything trying to be above the Constitution, and the Constitution has every right to rule what is below it. Isn't it? That's very important, and that's the constitutional morality. And today Babasaheb Ambedkar is likened with Manu. He said the people call him modern Manu, but no, who is Manu? This is very interesting insight that Babasaheb Ambedkar has provided us. He says lawmaking is the function of people. It is not the function of the class of people. Only the Brahmins cannot make the law, isn't it? So lawmaking is a function of not one individual. It is a function of people. It's a function of parliament. And why we do make the laws? To repair the faults of the society. So actually law is justice. If you summarize, this vision of Babasaheb, law is justice, because it is meant to repair the faults of the society. So this is a condition. We'll see whether the law is repairing the faults of the society or it's creating more faults within the society. That's the question that we need to raise. So one of the reasons for the decay of Hindu society, and Babasaheb Ambedkar is very categorical here, he says the difference between the ancient society and modern society lies in the fact that in the ancient societies, lawmaking was not for the function of the people. It was not for the people. Law was made by God or by the lawgiver. The function of the society was merely to obey law that was made either by the divine power or the lawmaker. This was the fundamental reason for ancient societies not having any continuous civilization. You cannot have continuous civilization, if the people at large are not involved. The true function of law consists in repairing the faults of the society. Unfortunately, ancient societies never dared to assume the function of repairing their own defects. Consequently, they decayed. One of the reasons for the decay of Hindu society is that it was governed by law which had either been made by Manu or Yajnavalkya. So these are very interesting things. The law cannot be made by one person. And of course, when we are talking about the parliamentary democracy today in the context of what is happening in this country and worldwide, the takeover of the authoritarian regimes in the world over, parliament is the middle path between the autocracy and the dictatorship of proletariat. Because what happens, the difference between the two from our point of view is very minor. The autocracy is the same as the dictatorship of the proletariat. How? Autocracy has taken upon itself the obligation to serve what are called the masses, but fundamentally this kind of dictatorship does not materially differ from absolute monarchy, because in neither of them the people play any part. And in democracy, as we have seen, the people have to play the part. Parliamentary democracy is a midway between the two. It's a very delicate institution. So you see, the way Babasaheb Ambedkar goes into understanding, giving the clarity of the democracy and how we can practice that, how we can challenge the various ideologies based on democracy. And democracy is the core value of Ambedkarism, if there is anything called Ambedkarism. I am going to come to that. So this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says: law is the abode of all worldly happiness. You see, he's making a very interesting point. He says, he addresses people and says, law is the abode of all worldly happiness. He's talking about worldly happiness. He says, it is the duty of the legislature to provide for your food. So question is the government taking care of the food, clothes, shelter, education, medicine, and all the means of earning a livelihood? So these are very deep concepts. Then what is there for the government? What is the role of the government? If he's not looking at the very important needs of the people, what is he doing to provide, the food security, to ensure that there is enough shelter, enough education, medicine? The duty of the state, they take, the government takes so much of in terms of taxation. So, the government is duty bound to provide health. The government is duty bound to provide education to the citizens, to shelter, food, clothes, and the means of earning a livelihood. The work of lawmaking and its execution is to be performed with your consent. Without consent, you cannot have a democracy. Help and will. In short, law is the abode of all worldly happiness. You capture the power of lawmaking. It's not enough just to obey the law. We have to capture the power of lawmaking. It is therefore your duty to divert your attention from past worship and penance and apply it to capturing lawmaking power. That way lies your salvation. Because without having power, we cannot change, transform. That way will end your starvation. Remember that it is not enough that a people are numerically in majority. They must be always watchful, strong, well-educated, self-respecting to attain and maintain success. These are all pithy words for us to bear in mind. We have to be always watchful. We have to be strong. We have to be well educated and self respecting to attain and maintain success. So, this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar aimed at. The democracy is the solution, to destroy the Brahminism, to destroy fascism, to destroy Nazism. And this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. He says the fundamental principle of the modern democratic state is the recognition of the value of the individual and the belief that as each individual has but one life, don't talk about several lives, life after life, life after life, life after life. No, the fundamental principle is that we have this one life. Full opportunity should be accorded to each one to attain his maximum development in this life. Neither of these propositions be said to form the parcel part of the accepted philosophy of the aristocracy of India, that is Brahminism. They rather hold the present life is for each only one of a series of existences, that the position of each individual in this life has been determined for him by his merits or demerits in his previous births. And that therefore no character howsoever high, no ability howsoever great, which a man may have to his credit, can alter his place in the social strata in which he is born. With the aristocracy, that is Brahminism, the notion that a man born a Brahmin cannot be other than a Brahmin, and a man born a pariah cannot be other than a pariah, is no idle talk. This is not just an idle talk. This is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. It is a living and operative faith. This is the living and operative faith of India. It's the faith of the majority of the people. To give unrestricted power in the hands of the people of this sort is to arm the hangman with a knife. If anybody is having this sort of the philosophy, Babasaheb Ambedkar says that you are handing over the knife to the hangman. They are already there to hang you to the death. And if you give power to the people who is having this philosophy, this social philosophy, you are actually also empowering them with a knife. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. He says democracy contradicts Brahminism. Very, very interesting concepts. And it has to be practiced. I'm going to talk about it. So, the rise of Brahminism is not just today. In the first election of India in 1937, when the election took place, following the Government of India Act 1935, this is a very remarkable insight. In the course of his speech, means Babasaheb Ambedkar, he said that the main thing to be borne in mind was that the British rulers, that time British were ruling India, who were indifferent to untouchables, were now replaced by a set of leaders who belong to the party of the social oppressors of the depressed classes, scheduled classes, backward classes, now we can include. Those were the days, he continued, of union, organization, and precaution from the point of view of the untouchables. He then pointed out how Brahminism was asserting itself in India through ministries installed by the Congress. All the Congress ministries were, he remarked, led by Brahmins, while there were no depressed class ministers. What for? If it's a democracy, there has to be representation for all the classes. That's what is meant by democracy. And in 1937, then we know what happened in 1946. What same pattern followed, isn't it? Till the rise of what is called the, plebeian politics. The rise of the, dominant caste politics in Maharashtra to some extent, and UP and Bihar in South India. So you see, this is a very, then where lies the true democracy? Where is the true democracy? Babasaheb Ambedkar says true democracy is safe only in the hands of the non-Brahmin. This is a very interesting. It says the view that true democracy in India could be safe only in the hands of the non-Brahmin party was expressed by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Labour member, Government of India, while speaking at party given in his honor on behalf of the Maratha and allied communities at R.M. Bhatt High School, Parel, Bombay on Sunday, 17th January 1943. And he says he regretted that the non-Brahmin party, which was in power in the Madras and Bombay provinces, had now disintegrated owing to various reasons. So Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted to bring the reconciliation of the Marathas and the non-Maratha OBCs, but it couldn't succeed. The non-Brahmin party, got divided, and the Congress has a very important role to play in that. And he says expressed the hope that profiting by the mistakes of the past, it would shed the minor differences that existed among its various sections and rebuild itself into a united and strong force again. For the success of a party, he mentioned three things as necessary: a leader, a good organization, and a clear and definite objective and a program. It was pity that many members of the non-Brahmin party had left it and joined the Congress, but they were now regretting their mistake. It was necessary not only for members of the particular communities, but also in the interest of democracy in India, that the non-Brahmin party should rebuild itself and become a power. So what we should do? Where are the signs of non-Brahmin parties emerging? The RSS is totally a Brahminical organization, and so is, the offering that it gave birth to. So where is the non-Brahmin presence? Where is, for example, people talk about the Dravidian model of growth. But as Babasaheb Ambedkar has remarked, and it's true today, that the non-Brahmin party, even in Tamil Nadu, could not do away with the caste prejudices. They became neo-Brahmins. They started putting the tilak and, all these things. They didn't become revolutionary the way Periyar wanted, the founder of the non-Brahminical vision. Particularly, even it is said today, the research says that they were all inspired by Jyotiba Phule's movement, when he started this non-Brahmin politics. So, you see, this is a very interesting thing that we need to bear in mind. For the democracy in India to succeed, it's very important to have the non-Brahmin parties, and they should rebuild itself themselves and become a power. Very interesting. And he says annihilation of caste is the realization of democracy. So long as the caste system exists in this country, there would never be a democracy. And he says the Scheduled Caste Federation, that is the party he found, must maintain its political existence under whatever circumstances. We have got the history of the non-Brahmin party before us. Before Congress came into prominence, the All India Non-Brahmin Party was in its zenith. But when the leaders of the Non-Brahmin Party went individual in Congress for their individual purposes, they were as if purchased, and as such, they had no voice in Congress then and even now. Even though they are a vast majority, they are ruled. So very interesting insight. Even if the OBCs are, the scheduled caste are in the vast number, even today they are ruled. So, people talk about civilizations, and this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says, that because India got in touch with the, democratic civilization, it has got it wake up from the deep slumber. There is a train in India today that everything, is ascribed to the past of India, that we were so great. There was a golden age, but golden age is never in the past. It has to be in the future. And if we want to have any civilization, it has to be democratic civilization. No other civilization can ensure liberty, equality, and fraternity. And that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says, that what is more important is that it's racial caste in the Indian context. Basis is a positive danger to India, that Nazism and fascism. And upholders of that, the people who praise Hitler's Nazism and fascism, their ideologues, have now captured this country. So if this is correct view of the situation, it seems to me that there lies on us a very heavy duty to see that democracy does not vanish from the earth as a governing principle of human relationship. That's the governing principle. Brahminism, caste system, racism, patriarchy cannot be the governing principles of human relationship. Only the democracy. And if we believe in it, then we must both be true and loyal to it. We must not only be staunch in our faith in democracy, but we must resolve to see that in whatever we do not help the enemies of democracy to uproot the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. On that point, I hope we are all agreed. And if you agree with me, then it follows that we must strive along with other democratic countries to maintain the basis of democratic civilization. If democracy lives, we are sure to reap the fruits of it. If democracy dies, it will be our doom. On that, there cannot be no doubt. Can be no doubt. So it's our duty to, ensure that democracy remains alive. So let's go to Babasaheb's very deep insights as to what we should do. So we should practice what is called the grammar of constitutionalism, not the grammar of anarchy. And now the leading scholars are talking about how the anarchy or chaos or rioting leads to the declining in the democracy, how the factionalism, how the communalism leads to the anarchy, and how that leads to the totalitarianism. So Babasaheb Ambedkar talks about stampede or nice adjustment. He was a philosopher who never resorted to violence. He was somebody who brought radical changes in the lives of millions of people, not by, radical bloody movement, not by the method of stampede, but by the method of nice adjustments. And these are his words. He says that civil disobedience movement is a movement of mass action. It's a movement, the essence of which is coercion. You cannot achieve things by coercion, by force. It is a method of stampede, and if carried out on a sufficiently large scale, it is bound to effect a revolution. A revolution, bloody or bloodless, it makes no difference, is a method of change which is most uncertain in its issue, and in which the danger of confusion and disaster in the process is very great. So we have seen what has happened throughout the revolutions in the country, in the various countries. Look at Russian Revolution, what happened. Look at what followed French Revolution. French Revolution was meant for the democracy. What happened after it? It was replaced by the authoritarian regime. Look at what happened in the Chinese Revolution. So we have to bear the history in mind as to what we should do. So he talks about, we have before us the famous example of the French Revolution, started for the ostensible purpose of establishing democracy, resulting in the establishment of autocracy. Revolutions are often inevitable. All the same, we must not forget the vast difference that separates a revolution from real social change. How do we bring the real social change? This is a very key concept. He says, a revolution transfers political power from one party to another. That's what happens in the revolution. Just as conquest transfers it from one nation or race to another. I'm sure we cannot be satisfied with an empty change of this sort. What we want is a transfer of power accompanied by such a distribution of power. That power, that the result will be a real social change in the relative strength of the forces operating in the society. There has to be the change in the relative strength of the forces operating in the society. So you see, the philosophy or the thinking of Babasaheb Ambedkar empower us. It's not everything is lost. There is nothing to become disheartened. There is so much in the philosophy of Babasaheb Ambedkar that he can directly speak to us even today in the face of the fear, in the face of the innumerable difficulties. That's the power of his ideas. That's the power of his philosophy. That's why he's dreaded by all the enemies of the democracy. You cannot appropriate Babasaheb Ambedkar. If we see how he engages with the deeper thoughts. So he says, this is a matter which needs adjustment. The future of the depressed classes, the scheduled caste, entirely depends upon such adjustment being recognized and implemented. The problem in India is not to make a government, nor is it to make freedom. The problem is to form a free government. What is a free government? And he quotes Burke. So, he is in this sense a follower of Edmund Burke, not the follower of Thomas Paine when it comes to revolution. He talks about Buddhism as a revolution, but it's a very interesting sort of the ideas that Babasaheb Ambedkar builds. So he says, in one context says, because this country is so complex. We cannot have one solution for the one remedy. There is no sovereign remedy. He said we need continuous adjustment, and adjustment which meant a radical change in the society. And he quotes Burke when it comes to the free government. He says, to make a government requires no great prudence, settle the seat of power, leech obedience, and no great prudence done. To give freedom is all more easy. It is not necessary to guide. It only requires to let go the rein. But to form a free government, that is to temper together these opposite elements of liberty and restraint in one consistent whole, requires much deeper thought and deeper reflection. You see, there is a tremendous scope of intelligence in the scheme of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Deep thoughts, deep reflections are very important, because then you can affect the change in the larger sort of the process. And the free government is all about, liberty and restraining. So, it's not just that you give a free rein to some government. We also have to find a ways to refrain them. And this is what needs much more thought and deep reflection. For it is a matter of nice adjustment, which I'm sure will not be possible in the stampede of sort involved in the method of civil disobedience. So he talks about the grammar of anarchy in terms of the satyagraha, in terms of the civil disobedience. This instrument are not to be used. We have to go to the constitutionalism. We have to, go to the democracy. We have to go as to how we can make it function. So let's look at the possible sort of the areas where the followers of Babasaheb Ambedkar can contribute. Or actually, I would say that they are the leading advocates of the democracy in this country. So long as the Ambedkar are concerned, they have safeguarded the democracy of this country for last 7 decades, I would say. They were the people who were talking about the constitution. They were the people who were talking about the fundamental rights. You see, so what Babasaheb says, the scheduled caste movement should make a common front with the working classes of other communities. With that object in view, I clung to the non-Brahmin party for full 10 years. Before Babasaheb Ambedkar found his own party, the Independent Labour Party, he was with the non-Brahmin party for full 10 years in the hope that sooner or later it would rise to full heights of its great mission of struggling for the freedom of the toiling masses of the great non-Brahmin community. It didn't happen. That party had in it the germs of the great principle of democracy. Its leaders, unfortunately, did not realize that their duties and responsibility. They allowed the party to be smashed to bits under the double influence of government and Congress patronage. So that is what has happened to the non-Brahmin movement. It was smashed into pieces. And the development of the non-Brahmin movement is essential to the democracy in this country, is the essential condition for the democratization of this country. So he says, I do not insist that the non-Brahmin laboring masses should join a party, that is his movement. He says, let them have their own party if they so desire. But we can certainly make a common front against the exploiting classes in our common struggle against the Brahmins, the capitalists, the landlords, and the exploiting classes. What is the problem there to form the common front? People can have their federation. The non-Brahmins can have their federation. There can be, the what is called the regional parties. It's all good. But the most important thing is to form a common front against the common, class enemies like the Brahmins, the capitalists, landlords, and other exploiting classes. So that germ of thought has to be impregnated in the Indian consciousness today, that there is a need to form a common front. It doesn't matter that people have their separate identities. So he says, by breaking up the party, the non-Brahmins have committed a political suicide. I do not desire to follow such a suicidal policy. The depressed classes will continue to have their own political organization. So when it comes to the follower of Babasaheb Ambedkar, the people who were part of his movement, he says the political power cannot be the only panacea. He says we have to elevate ourselves socially. We have to have good habits. We have to improve the bad ways of living. We have to bring the change in the mode of living. That's all taken care of now because of the movement of Babasaheb Ambedkar. He has given so much, because we tend to look at him only as a political person, but he has elevated the society. He has pointed us where do the good habits lie. He has given us what is the best way of living. He has given us the completely transformed mode of life. How we can live as a human being. He's a paragon or the model of humanity. And the new life movement is important as the political movement. And it says organization is the key to solve the problems of the scheduled caste. If there is no organization, there is no solution to the problems. and he has all his life struggled to form the organization. He says we are not slaves, we are warriors. The value of man is axiomatic, self-evident. It does not come to him as the result of gliding or bhakti. We don't need religion, for that matter, to claim that we are equal to others. We don't need that. And man is immortal. He says everyone is to die someday or other. But one must resolve to lay down one's life in enriching the noble ideals of self-respect and in bettering human life. We are not slaves. We are a warrior class. True. Nothing is more disrespectful, disgraceful for a brave man than to live a life devoid of self respect and without love for the country. He says, the what we are fighting for, that is the destruction of the Brahminical system, caste system, the aristocracy of wealth, education, and social standing, is the contradiction to democracy. Democracy, in other words, people's power to the people. That's the democracy, not the power to one particular class of people. So, I'm going into the deeper concept as to how this framework enable us to look at what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do, and based on that, what we should do. He says, people, not only us, the scheduled caste, do not live on only law and order. What they live on is bread and butter. The inexorable law of life must make even the depressed classes demand a government that will help the economic prosperity of the country and thereby effect a betterment in their material life. So material life we cannot forego, isn't it? The facts of life we cannot forego. The bread and butter we cannot forego. We must have a government in which men in power, knowing where obedience will end and resistance will begin, will not be afraid to amend the social and economic code of life. So if we don't amend the social and economic code of life, there will be one day civil war in this country. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar thought. If the democracy is destroyed, what is the alternative? It's authoritarianism. It's a chaos. It's a complete rioting. So because the major part of society is absorbed in these wordless mysteries of life, you know, nobody is thinking about the facts of life. They're absorbed in the worthless mysteries of life, superstitions and mysticism. The intelligent and the self-centered people get ample scope and opportunities to carry out their anti-social designs. You see, these are all very important. I therefore appeal to you, he concluded, to act and utilize what little political power is coming into your hands. If you are indifferent and do not try to use it properly, your worries will have no end. You see, the quota in the parliament that Babasaheb Ambedkar got, in the legislative assembly that he got, without that, there will not be anybody in the parliament. There will not be anybody in the legislative assembly coming from the scheduled caste background. Because there is a quota, at least the voice is reflected, and that's bringing a lot of social endosmosis. The MPs participate in the common cycle of participation, exchange ideas, exchange thoughts. So don't undermine the kind of political power we have today, even in terms of the quota, even though the people are representing their political parties, even to have the presence of the scheduled caste in the parliament, in the state assemblies, has a tremendous safeguard. So this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do today, because there people are trying to divide even the followers of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And how we can deal with it? What is the solution of Babasaheb Ambedkar? So in the context of the monk community in Maharashtra, he has talked, because he was invited by all the communities. He was no longer the leader of just one particular caste. So he says that it was not an evil for which the depressed classes were responsible. We are not responsible for what is happening to us, what is meted out to us by the Hindu social order. It is not, due to us. So he says that is not an evil for which the depressed classes were responsible. It was Hinduism which was responsible for it. If the monk community wanted to get out of the evil effects of the caste system, they had perforce to get out of that fold. He assured the monk community, as a member of the Mahar community, a majority community of the depressed class in the Bombay presidency, that if they choose to come with them, there will be no distinction whatsoever between the Mahars and the monks. He further assured that the monk community, that the Mahars were prepared to guarantee them their quota out of the 15 seats allotted to the depressed classes in the Bombay presidency, provided that they were prepared to abide by the pledges of the party. So you see, in the today's context, the movement has to ensure that there has to be representation to even the smaller classes. But that can only be done if they are in the quest of the common quest of democracy, not for the partisan interest of their caste, not just to enjoy the benefits because of the competition between the castes. That's what is happening in this country today. So, and it's also important to control the means of production. Without controlling the means of the production, there cannot be democracy. And Baba Ambedkar has put this very beautiful phrase: cut the classes and spare the masses. So this is the principle that has to be applied in the taxation. What is happening in this country, that the masses are paying huge taxes, and the classes are, their debts are forgiven, and they are given a lot of subsidies. But what is happening to the poor people? What is happening to the farmer? It's completely against the principle that Baba Ambedkar had so beautifully put: cut the classes and spare the masses. I'm not going to go much into that because I got a lot to talk today, because it's a vast topic. And I'm going to spare another 15 minutes, and then we will open up the session for any comments, discussion. So, what is how the politics is very important. The political parties are very important, and the politics and the class consciousness. You cannot have the politics without class consciousness. So it is not necessary to dissolve all the organizations for this purpose. It is not necessary to have a merger. Common front is quite enough. I'm sorry that many people do not seem to realize that the right wing of the Congress is merely using imperialism as an excuse for preventing separate and independent organization of labor. If you replace the word labor by the OBCs, SCs, STs, and replace the word Congress by a dominant party, I warn you against falling into this error. Politics must be based on class consciousness. Politics which is not class conscious is hypocrisy. Why do we have a policy purpose? If we are not fighting for the interest of a majority of the class in this country. You must therefore join a political party which is based upon class interest and class consciousness. It's a very deeper concept. And wrongs which principally teaches the masses the value of the political rights. Your wrongs are great, your wrongs are real, therefore your politics can be genuine. So the politics of the scheduled caste, the politics of the disadvantaged classes is a genuine politics. It's a real politics. If you realize this, you can be beacon of light to all labor in India, means to all the classes, in the manner of genuine political organization. For the proper discharge of the duty, you have to be the man of sterling character, to whom the rest of the society will look to as the models of humanity. In other words, we have to strive to become the models of humanity, not just the model Indian or the model Maharashtrian or the model Tamils or model, North Indian. We have to become the models of humanity. You must remember that you are not a crowd or a mob, you are a battalion. And the difference between the two is obvious. And this is what is the insight, what Baba Ambedkar would do today. A handful of well-trained, well-disciplined men, means also women. That was the term at the time. Now it's people. Like you are able to control a crowd of thousands. That is the essence of the difference between you and an ordinary crowd. So when you build a movement, Ambedkarite movement, you are not building a crowd. You are building a handful of well-trained, well-disciplined men and women who are able to control a crowd of thousands. So how the struggle of Ambedkarite nurtures the democracy? The struggle which comprised of the lowest strata of society was bound to help in the amelioration of all other sections. This is the importance of Babasaheb Ambedkar's movement. What the followers of Babasaheb Ambedkar are doing, the movement is so critical for the democracy. The social movement is so critical for the democracy in India that when the bottommost stone in the structure was shifted from its place, those above it were bound to be shaken out of their position. So if you remove the bottommost stone, the whole entire structure falls. That's why the RSS and the Orthodox Brahmins are wary of the conversion movement, because it completely shifts the scheduled caste from the pyramid of the caste system. It gives them a completely new system, a completely new way to develop their humanity. He pointed out that the caste Hindu laborers had not outgrown their prejudice. So we have to work on the prejudices among ourselves. We have to find the ways by which we can bring people together. Now, coming to the concluding parts of what Baba Ambedkar would do, I am giving you all these ideas, placing before you so that we know what Baba Ambedkar would do today. And, we can derive a lot of methods from what discussions we are having today. Is Indian democracy sabotaged by the authoritarian? This is my question. So a democratic institution becomes more deeply rooted in the country, so do fundamental political rights, liberties, and opportunities. So the democratic institution becomes rooted when there is a fundamental political rights, liberties, and opportunities. If you close this, if you destroy the fundamental political rights, liberties, and opportunities, you are destroying the democratic institutions. As a democratic government matures in the country, the likelihood that it will give way to an authoritarian regime approaches zero. All mature democracies, the basic rights are maintained well above the threshold necessary for democracy. Ideally, democracy is a political system designed for citizens of a state who are willing to treat one another as political equals for political purposes. Now, you see the segregation based on the religion, the segregation based on the caste, segregation based on the region is never going to make democracy a political system that is designed for all. So, this is, I have taken it from a very interesting book which is just released, where the 11 thought leaders, women thought leaders, have talked about democracy. And, they have talked about democracy, why it is important and why it matters. And I have taken it from a very interesting short paper which Margaret Atwood, a very famous writer alive today, has written. And she has given up this, framework, the tool to think through as to what happens. And I find it very interesting because it matches to a T with the thinking of Babasaheb Ambedkar, isn't it? If we do not maintain this temperate zone, that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about. If we disturb that, you become extreme left or extreme right. And Babasaheb Ambedkar, it's very difficult to put him as, a conservative or a liberal, because he was somebody who didn't hold the ideas like, as an orthodox person. He played out the ideas to lift the societies to the ever higher levels. And if you shift to any extremities of the left or right, political left or political right, what happens? If there is a rioting or chaos or confusion, hatred, disparities in the society, that can be termed as chaos by both routes, through the extreme right and extreme left, it can lead to the totalitarianism. So very interesting insight. So it's very, very important to maintain this balance, as we have been seeing how we can bring the necessary adjustment. And I think this is what is happening in this country, as there are books now which shows that, the RSS has completely taken over the institution of this country. The people from the RSS, they man the ministries. That started from 2014. And, their think tank started playing into the as a role in dictating the policies. And we can say that, that is the fall of the constitution. Of course, India never had the democracy the way Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted. And, that's what is the Ambedkarite movement is all about. And there is a rise of a shadow state in this country. And this is what shows us that possible pitfalls of what can happen if I'm going to read something from her this thing. She says, Margaret Atwood, in a short paper on democracy, she says, imagine a circle. At the top is totalitarianism, and at the bottom is chaos. Dictators rule totalitarianism, and gangs, mobs, and the war of each against all thrives in chaos. So you see, in the chaos, you have mobs like vigilantes, gangs, and there is a continuous hatred going on, which is called, it's called chaos. Through the middle of the circle is what we call the temperate zone. And what does the temperate zone does? It respects the concept that those ruled ought to have a say in their rulers, or no taxation without representation, that rulers should be accountable to the rule of law, that the judiciary, those interpreting and implementing the laws, should not be controlled by a dictator, and that freedom of religion, freedom to debate, and freedom of peaceful assembly are sacrosanct. They cannot be touched. The constitutional morality has to be practiced. From the temperate zone, there is an arrow going up to totalitarianism on the political right and on the political left. You can get there either way. Hitler was elected to begin with. The USSR began with communism, but ended with dictatorships of Stalin and his successor. There are also two arrows going down towards chaos. on left and right, upset the balance of temperate zone, find yourself in a civil war, witness a breakdown of the institutions that keep things running, the supply chain, the tax department, healthcare, the schools, and chaos will be the result. So you disturb the institution, you disturb the democratic institution, results in the chaos, and easy for the totalitarianism to take place. So this is what there are some troublesome areas today, as we know, communalism, the rise of the Brahman Raj in the guise of Hindutva. This is what is happening. Casteism, reservation to the upper caste. Why there is a need? There is no social justice issue in there. Devolution of reservation, sub quota within quota. What is the need of there? You are making the caste as a unit, and that's completely against that you talk about a class as a minority. You talk about the scheduled caste. You cannot fracture the movement within or the minority within. And then there is a caste raj, that some castes are very political dominant. Glaring economic inequalities. There is a need to bring tax reforms as Babasaheb Ambedkar envisioned. Keep this phrase of Babasaheb Ambedkar in mind: cut the classes and spare the masses. And of course, economic development. There is a very faulty economic system, electoral system, which doesn't ensure that there is you know representation. So Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted to amend the constitution to bring in plural member constituency with cumulative votes, as we have seen in the previous section. I'm not going to go into that. So how to nurture the democracy? Of course, we have to have the democratic survey of India, as Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted. We have to affect the movement among the non-Brahmin communities to bring about the true democracy. The scheduled caste, particularly the follow of Babasaheb Ambedkar, must educate other Indians in democracy. That's our duty bound. Strong organization of the scheduled caste with openness to build a common front against Brahminism. That is the code. Become participants in promoting and reinforcing the ideas and practice of democracy. And that's where Babasaheb Ambedkar comes into play. That what we are doing is under the Ambedkar School of Governance. The original germ of the idea lies in the Ambedkar School of Politics that Babasaheb Ambedkar has himself established. And he said there is a need of study of politics. And I think this is very critical to bringing democracy in this country, because Babasaheb Ambedkar means democracy. He's the tallest symbol of the democracy. Whenever we think of Babasaheb Ambedkar, we think of democracy. But this is what he has to say. And I think this is very instructive for us. He says, man is not a political animal. We are not political animal by birth. One had to make the most deliberate attempt to make man politically conscious. So, to make the Ambedkarite to begin with politically conscious, very important. And the object of the Ambedkar School of Politics, Babasaheb Ambedkar says, was the study of politics. We have to study the politics. And he says, it should be foolproof and new-proof, high standard of study and knowledge. He says the motto of this school was to have study, struggle, and sacrifice. 3S: study, struggle, and sacrifice. So that's the motto of the Ambedkar School of Politics, which he founded in 1940s. And Babasaheb Ambedkar, he says, this is very critical. He says no institution or society could survive in the struggle for existence which was not free to make such adjustment in its ideas as time and circumstance required. So we have to be flexible in making adjustment to the ideas depending on the time and circumstances. And he goes deeper into this. He says, I do not want to propose a school or a creed in his name. He says that he should be sorry if such a school came into existence after his death. He says, follow me only if you are satisfied in your mind that he is right. So the exercise that we are conducting through the Ambedkar School of Governance, which is in the modern day parlance, what we are trying to do is cultivate, expose people to the thoughts of Babasaheb Ambedkar. You are not imposing any school of thoughts. Let people examine, let people think through, and then if they are satisfied, they should take these ideas further. There is no there is no political creed. We are not trying to find of establish a political creed in the name of Babasaheb Ambedkar. This is what he says. It was precarious sort of existence to be always dependent upon the inspiration of those men who died long ago. Then he talks about Tilak, that people are referring to Tilak all the time, even if he's gone. So he says this should not happen to me. He says that you should be thinking through, you should engage with the ideas, and you should change the ideas, make adjustment in the ideas depending on the time and circumstances required. And he talked in the in terms of the Samta Sainik Dal. He said that the vision of the Samta Sainik Dal is now become political. He says all the energies are now put. It was formed to safeguard the community, but he says now in the 40s we have a different vision. We have to safeguard our political interest, and he says creation of the political creeds caused tragedy. So you see, he's thought of opening up our mind to more, think through things, and I'm going to show you how we can do it. He says combine academic life with the practical problems of life. And he says, with a large majority of our students had been interesting themselves in political movements, they had not a clear realization of what politics means, what responsibilities it involves, and what methods must be pursued in order to bring political activities to function. There was, as I observe it, as Babasaheb observed it, a complete dissociation of what we call academic life from the practical problems of life and politics. You will have to do two things. That's what we have to do, two things. To enlarge our minds, our vision, our capacity to think, our ability to solve problems, and secondly, to bring that capacity, that vision, that ability to form judgment to bear upon the actual problems which the vast mass of the people of this country are facing today. It is no more going to be more incubation in our solitary room, in a chemistry or physics laboratory. It is something much wider than that. We will not merely learn political economy, political science, history, commerce, trade, currency, all the subjects which touch upon the practical life of problem. But you will use that teaching, that learning to suggest not merely to yourself, but to the politicians in charge of the affairs of this country, what are the right solution of the problems before them and where they are going wrong. See, this is what is Babasaheb's method is all about, isn't it? This is how we can take the Karwan ahead. This is how we can strengthen the democracy in this country. And it says, in a complex society, no sovereign remedy may be possible. In my judgment, there can be no dogma as to what constitutes good government. Different people may draw different ideas of good government. The capitalists think that the capitalist form of government where there is a laissez-faire is a good sort of government. The socialist, on the other hand, think that the socialist form of government is a good government. There might be a variety of other people of their own brand. The fact is that there are a variety of opinions as to what constitutes good government. In a complex society such as ours, with all its different ramifications, no sovereign remedy may be possible. So, in other words, we do not have to become the sort of orthodox in our thinking. We have to keep on, finding out many remedies because the society is very complex. The problems are very complex. And this is what he says. He says this is what is the supreme qualification necessary for in the democracy, the art of speaking. And what Babasaheb Ambedkar achieved, through his art of speaking, perseverance, the way he persuaded the illiterate people, the way he talked in the Constituent Assembly debates, the way he talked, in the audience of the 50,000, 75,000 people. That's how he brought the success. So he says, in an autocracy where the laws are made by the wishes of a dictator or by an absolute monarch, the art of speaking is unnecessary. No autocrat, no absolute monarch need pay any attention to eloquence because his will is law. But in parliament, where laws are made, no doubt by the wishes of the people, the man who succeeds in winning over opposition is the man who possesses the art to persuade his opponents. You cannot win over a majority in this house by giving a black eye to your opponent. A minority is not going to curb a majority by bringing gundas, nor is the majority going to record and obtain a victory by laying low the members of the minority. You will have to carry a proposition that only by the art of speaking, in today's parlance, art of writing, art of making blogs, podcast, using social media, by persuading his opponent, by winning him over his side by argument, either gentle or strong, but always logical and instructively. So we have to argue logically and instructively. In every way we communicate, we have to instruct to whom we are talking. Not merely to be, it's important to be logical. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar did. Every speech of his is education. The way he educate the people, and we are all educable. That is the meaning of the word education. That there is an educability in each of us. It doesn't mean that we have to be highly educated. Educability is a fundamental principle. And he says, we have to argue in a way not only logically but also instructively. Therefore, a supreme qualification for success is the art of speaking. I'm going to come to the end of my very long session. And this is what Baba Ambedkar has mentioned. And this is a very vital point that I am going to end with is the Indian Union is to be formed with a view to make it possible for every subject citizen to enjoy freedom from want and freedom from fear. I have been thinking about this line for a long time. Freedom from want is very easy to understand. What did Baba Ambedkar mean by freedom from fear? What did he mean by the freedom from fear? This caste system is a system that creates fear, that creates, a lot of fear among the minds of the people. And the test is to ensure that the people are free from the fear. Therefore, if the state sponsor violence, it's a complete negation of the democracy because it creates fear in the minds of the people. So there is a school of anthropology which was started by Boas in Columbia University, and Alexander Alexander, this Golden Weiser was a teacher of Baba Ambedkar, was a student of Boas, who demonstrated the cultural unity of the humanity. You cannot fragment the society into separate cultures, saying that this is inferior, that is inferior. And they talked about the unity of the human race. And his two disciples, very intelligent disciples, they did contribute a lot. And one, this Joella, who wrote a lot. Then there was Margaret Mead, who contributed a lot. There were these three powerful women. And the last but not the least was Ruth Benedict. And she has written a book, when during the era public affair pamphlets. One of the pamphlets she wrote, which talks about the cultural unity of the mankind. And there she puts up this illustration. And here she titles it as Freedom from Fear Brings Freedom from Prejudice. If we have a fear, we will always have a prejudice. And whenever there is a prejudice, there will be, a problem in the country. There will be chaos. And where there is a chaos, there is a possibility of authoritarianism, as we have seen what Margaret Atwood has shown. And that is what Baba Ambedkar has been talking about since the beginning of his movement. So, you see, you need freedom. But the essential freedom is from the fear. So there is a fear of old age. There is a fear of, having no medical facility. There are fear of being unemployed. There are fear of losing what we have. So unless there is a system, there is in the democracy, if it is not taking care of the freedom from fear, it will always bring freedom. It will lead to the prejudice if the people are fearful. So the underlying thing is, when we look at Baba Ambedkar and his prowess, his intellectual legacy, his methods, we have nothing to fear, isn't it? And at one point he says that the method lies through the suffering. It is not that the democracy is going to just come like this in this country. We have to struggle, sacrifice, and more sacrifices. And when Baba Ambedkar's true vision, true principles, which are the foundation of the Constitution of India, are realized, then only this country can succeed. And I can say that in this dark age, there is only one icon star that shines as a beacon of light for this country, and I would say the world, where the authoritarian regimes are coming into, is Baba Saheb Ambedkar. His relevance is not just for us. His relevance is for the whole world. And that's what we have seen in this presentation as to what Baba Ambedkar would do, what kind of an ideas that we have to develop, how we have to build the movements, how we can challenge the authoritarian regime. So with this, I will end this session and end this series of 6 lectures, which constitute our what is called the Ambedkar Constitution and Constitutionalism. And I will open the session for any comments or discussion. It has to take a long time because we are dealing with very important questions.
So can I speak, sir?
Yes, Amrit, please go on.
So in the slide, I saw that art of speaking.
Yes.
So I haven't checked where can we get this because art of speaking is very important. People may not read this literature of Babasaheb, all this literature, most people, masses. So where can we get the original videos of Babasaheb's speeches and such stuff?
There are not many, but whatever there are limit available, they are very instructive. And I will send you some of the analysis that I have done, and I am going to run a course on Ambedkar rhetoric as to how to speak like Babasaheb Ambedkar, how to think like Babasaheb Ambedkar, how to write like Babasaheb Ambedkar. So, wait for that course. Let me have some ground preparation so that we will have a 6-session course on art of speaking rhetoric. Okay.
Okay, sir. And another one question. What do you think of the philosophy of Bhagat Singh?
Let's limit the discussion to Babasaheb. Okay.
Okay.
So, anybody has anything to say on this long exposition?
Jai Bhim, sir. Prashant Vasnik.
Jai Bhim, Prashant.
Sir, as you said right now that you are planning a course on this rhetoric, writing, speaking.
Yeah.
So that has intrigued me very much. I am really interested in that. And so what I feel
Yeah.
like what our Bahujan community in particular needs today is good leaders.
Yeah.
So the leadership quality development in our people is a very is the need of the hour that I think.
Yeah.
So leadership quality in terms of speaking, in terms of writing, the confidence, the knowledge, everything.
Yeah.
And if we develop leaders in our community, that will help the next generations because since last three or four decades there has been a like lack of a strong leadership in our community.
Yeah.
So, sir, I would request you like think on this lines also, and we can also try to do that, something like that.
Yeah. I think these are all what we are doing is a part of that particular line of thinking or the method.
Right.
I think it takes a time to build up a community, and the as we know, and Nikhil is there. We have been conducting. Umesh is there. We have been conducting this reading groups for a long time now, 5 years, and I think though it's not a visible contribution, but it's doing a lot of good to the people. In the heydays, many people used to join, and a lot of people listen to a lot of things. There are a lot of videos now available, and many scholars have spoken. So, in a way, we are trying to build this intellectual legacy.
Right.
And I'm sure that the more people will engage with Baba Sahib's thoughts, read his writings, I don't think people are applying themselves to understand Baba Sahib Ambedkar. We just do the sloganeering. We don't engage with his ideas.
Correct.
And I think the powerhouse is there, so long as the blue books are there. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar says in one book he wrote, and I don't remember the title, he quotes Bhaubuti. He says that the time and space is huge, and somebody will be there who will read his work. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar expected that whatever he has done, this very deep thinking, somebody will engage with it. We will engage with it as a community, bring forth those ideas, to the people through the art of communication. There's so much in Baba Sahib, so much,
Agree, sir.
and we have to explore that. I would say that it's how it's so pleasurable to read Baba Sahib's work. As Perry Anderson says, reading Ambedkar is like entering into a different world altogether. And he says that he stands head and shoulder above Nehru and Gandhi. These are not. He's Perry Anderson. He's one of the leading intellectuals today.
In fact, I would add here, sir, कि after reading some of the Baba Sahib books, my English has improved a lot.
Yeah.
Because,
It's a total course in improving to become the model of humanity.
yeah, because the like the word bank and everything, whatever words Baba Sahib used in the books and all, we don't come across it in regular context of reading or in any regular books and all.
See, one of the qualities of Baba Sahib Ambedkar is not somebody who is trying to convince you to accept his thoughts. He's asking you to think more deeper,
Correct.
more bigger, more greater. He's in a way he's handing over to you the tools, isn't it? So reading his books is not just about knowledge; it's about empowering yourself intellectually. becoming the
Correct.
thought leaders. They are so, they are pioneering books. We go here and there, read this and that, but we don't engage with our own father. And I think that's one of the big problems of the movement.
Correct, sir. So our father's generation, they just struggled with, living a good life and
Yeah.
passing on thing to the next generation. Now our generation's responsibility is not just to say Jai Bhim or put up Babasaheb's portrait in our home, but to live Babasaheb.
I
And to
agree.
live Babasaheb, we first have to understand and develop those thinking,
Yes.
Ambedkarite thinking.
Yes. Very well. Very nicely said. So anybody has anything to say? Sorry for
Yes,
this.
I have to say
Yes.
thank you very much for
Hello.
conducting.
Hello.
Pandit, wait for a moment. Yes, Mahendra.
Thank you very much for conducting such courses. I have personally been very benefited. I have felt that reading and listening Babasaheb for one or two occasions is not enough. We have to read him and understand him again and again. Only then we acquire clarity.
Yes.
I am in Jaipur, so after listening to you, I am sharing to others. Then my own understanding develops. And thank you very much. And I would like to enroll in your course on Babasaheb rhetoric.
Yeah. We'll begin it soon. Let me have a ground.
Sure.
Yeah, Prandeep.
Thank you very much again.
Welcome, sir. Prandeep.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Hello, everyone. It was like I learned a lot during this session, starting from the first day to today. And the presentation were excellent, I would say, and well written and well researched. So I've even talked with many of my friends here out in Northeast India.
Yeah.
It's very good thing that people are getting to know about Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar more nowadays. We were in Northeast India, basically, very honestly telling, there is less instances of casteism and less instances of like ostracization among scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC. So Northeast is little bit, very honestly telling, I should not say, feel sad that we are a little bit cut off from the mainland Indian issues. So that's why I used to say something or the other in the group, that the Ambedkar economics group, that we have not faced a sort of like atrocities being done by upper caste community, because here general or unreserved community are very less if you see in Northeast India. That's why the atrocities on scheduled caste, scheduled tribe are less. Because in Northeast India, there are more scheduled tribe as well as there are more tribe communities. So that's why the unreserved community are unable to administer or control Northeast India. Except under, I have to speak it up, except under BJP rule currently in Assam, all are undergoing Brahminic rule under the so-called self-proclaimed CM of Assam, which is like torturing as well as like a pioneer of bulldozer politics, and everything are being done on the marginalized community of Assam. So like now we are reeling under the feel of Brahminic rule. So now we are getting what is exactly like Brahminic rule, and we all are suffering. So that is the thing which we want to say, that Ambedkar is the need of the hour in Assam. So this course is very, very important, and the feeling of Ambedkar is very much needed, and people are feeling the need of Ambedkar in Assam. So that's what I would like to say.
I look at you as one of the pioneers, because I look at you as a very young voice who is very good art. You articulate your ideas well, and I look at you as one of the future leaders of the community, not only in Northeast. And I hope that all the youngsters here, they can take the basic message that nothing is possible without struggle, suffering, sacrifice. As Babasaheb Ambedkar has given this mantra for this Ambedkar School of Politics: study, struggle, and sacrifice. 3 S. You write it down. And all the success goes through this: study, struggle, sacrifice. Okay, so thank you, Prandeep. I'm very happy, very glad that you could join this, and I enjoy your comments in the group. Okay, anyone has anything to say?
Yeah.
Umesh.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much for
Thank you so much.
Hello. For this very lucid and deep insight.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Of the deliberations.
Yeah, please go on.
It was a really very wonderful talk. Yes, it gives a much deeper and inner understanding of our constitution and the concept of democracy.
Yeah.
You have made it very clear. I just want to say I have been educating people on the concept of constitution for the past 15 years. I just wanted to just a simplified introduction, because most of the people, I'm talking about the people in general, not our own people.
Yeah.
Because the people, they lack understanding. They do not even know, even the educated class, they do not know what constitution is all about. So that was the need that we must take the concept of constitution to the people in general.
Yeah.
We are discussing among ourselves. That is very good, because we also should have a deeper understanding than what we have.
Yes.
Yeah. And,
thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you, Dr. Saab.
Yeah, as in this direction, I also wrote an article, and I sent it to Indian Express, so that more and more people know about the Constitution.
Great.
More and more people know about the role of Babasaheb, Dr. Ambedkar,
Great.
and his vision about the Constitution. So
Great, sir. Great.
these are some of the things which I'm trying to do.
Great.
And also I have devised a quiz on Constitution, and
please share in the group if you are in the group, sir.
Yeah, I will. Yes.
Please, sir.
It is a multiple choice questions, and
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
We'll meet you again in your endeavor. You have proposed so many ideas.
Yeah.
And definitely we'll be there.
Yeah. Yes.
More and more people will join this stream.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Umesh?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Javim, Dr. First of all, I am very obliged that you have successfully completed these sessions. Very wonderful and very insightful. And thanks for your hard work. One thing that I want to share over here is that we are in the era where the writing and speeches of Babasaheb will lead us the path. We have established one small library in the villages also, and where we have put all the volumes in the regional language, rather in Hindi, rather than in English, and it is available in all the regional languages. Why not we all should procure those for ourselves also, and we try to establish libraries in the areas, rural areas, where we can devote at least 1 hour in a week or 2 hours a week to visit over there, and to let them show how to read it as per your lectures, and make them understand what is the need of it. These are the submission, Dr. Saab, and thank you so much for your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Umesh bhai. Thank you so much. So, Nikhil, you here or gone?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yes, sir.
So, you don't have to say anything. I'm just letting you have a concluding word before I finally offer my comments, and we'll conclude after that.
Yes, sir. I actually just wanted to, first of all, thank you to you as well as everyone who attended almost regularly, week by week. Like we had this weekly 6 session series, and as well as the previous series as well. And I would request all the members to keep checking the group so that any future plans that are there will be conveyed there accordingly. And you can also go to the YouTube channel and maybe watch the previous discussions that have happened since the last 5 years. There are a lot of discussions that will be very pleasing for you to watch, and as well as very enriching. So yeah, that is it from my side. Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you, Nikhil, and we will carry on this process.
What is the name of the YouTube channel?
It's Ambedkar School of Governance. We will. Are you in the group? I will send you a link there. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So thank you all. And personally, for me, it's very enriching to go back to Babasaheb's ideas and look at them, study them. And I'm sure that most of you will find this session interesting. And I hope that eventually all of you will go back to the original source, to the source itself, source of matrix, and learn a lot from the master himself. And I think this is a very interesting way to bring Babasaheb Ambedkar alive for us today. Not only worship him or love to model on his personality, but I think it's very important to engage with his mind, that's his thoughts, and the way he liberates you from prejudices, the way he liberates you from the from the fear, the way he empowers you is itself such a thing for everybody to engage with his ideas. And I think that is, if we can even make a few people to go back to his ideas, I think our purpose is all. And with this I will conclude, and we will meet eventually for the next course. Give me some time to prepare. And thank you so much for all to join regularly, and we will engage again together. So Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya.
Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim.
Thank you.
Jai Bhim. Thank you.